This is a Collector Guy's countdown of the coolest action figures of the 60s and 70s. This is my opinion. I would love to hear your list. Number 5, Johnny West and the Best of the West series. To learn about this series, we have to go back in time to the Old West, and I'm talking 1965, when Marx put out these action figures as the Best of the West series with Johnny West, which was basically a Western version of G.I. Joe. Standing 12 inches tall, Johnny West was the first of what would eventually be a set of 19 different action figures, 8 horses, various pets, wagons, and an amazing number of accessories, both large and small. You had good guys like Johnny, a family man who had a wife named Jane and 4 kids like Josie here. I'd show you the others, but I don't own them. You had bad guys like the Man in Black, Sam Cobra. Watch out for that dynamite. You had Native Americans like Geronimo here, who like the others came with a number of cool accessories. Even General Custer became part of the set, which is one of my favorite figures in his blue cavalry uniform. And back to those accessories. Figures would come with guns, knives, foot lockers, drums, even a coffee pot and cup for hanging out around a campfire. And the horses came with full tack. Absolutely amazing. So if you got a Johnny West action figure back in the late 60s and early 70s, this is what you would have got. Let's look at one here probably from the late 60s, I'm going to say, just because of the artwork. But here's Johnny. His hat comes off, neckerchief, vest, spurs, posable, sturdy action figure here. You know, I'm not going to move them too much because I've seen too many of these with the legs and the arms that have fallen off. You know, good piece there. And he had his chaps. He also was very well armed. He had his rifle, his knife. He had his holster and his pistol. That was exceptionally cool. He also had this little gun here, which is, I guess, for keeping your boot in case you're caught cheating at cards, which I don't think Johnny'd ever do that. Then he had all this stuff, just, you know, living on the range. A pan for cooking your food, canteen for water. You got 2 brands with the letter L. I'm not quite sure what that's for, what that stands for. Of course, we mentioned the locker earlier, the coffee pot and the cup. We mentioned that earlier too. And last but not least, he got 3 bags of gold, which, you know, I guess you need money to survive at any time, but I don't know, maybe use this to take Barbie out on a date. I don't know. I mean, that'd have to be before marrying Jane, but because we know Johnny West is not that kind of guy. But yeah, all this stuff here, everything you need to have a great time in the Old West. Marx produced this set for about 10 years, and you can easily find them on eBay and sometimes in antique stores. Now remember, there are a lot of little parts to these things, so complete sets are a little hard to come by. And there you have it, Johnny West and the Best of the West series. Number 5 on my list of coolest action figures of the 60s and 70s. Number 4, Steve Austin from the $6 Million Man series. The $6 Million Man ran on ABC from 1974 to 1978 and featured the adventures of Steve Austin, a NASA test pilot who was injured in a crash and was rebuilt with a bionic arm, eye, and legs. Released by Kenner in 1975, standing 13 inches tall and wearing the same tracksuit he wore in the series open, Steve Austin was bigger than the other figures at the time. He came in these versions. First, with the engine block and non-removable arm. Then, with engine block and removable arm and legs, with bionic grip and steel beam for him to lift, replacing the engine block, and last, the rare biosonic arm. And boy, did the kids love him. Before long, Steve Austin was the most popular toy in America. The $6 Million Man was one of the first action figures to have accessories actually built into the figure. There was the iconic bionic eye that you could look through the back of his head, and there was also the powerlifting arm that if you turned his head sideways and hit this button on the back, he would slowly lift his arm up and lift either the engine block that came with him or the steel girder or whatever you wanted to put in his hand.
Coins Captain Steve Austin on Mars. Your radio signal's weak.
The new $6 Million Man with bionic grip and new Mission to Mars adventure set, sold separately.
Uses bionic eye. The radio tower fell. We'll fix it. Using his bionic grip. Careful, Steve. Grip it. Hold on. Did it. Mission accomplished.
Kenner's new $6 Million Man with bionic grip, Mission to Mars adventure set, sold separately.
The series also included companion pieces like Oscar Goldman and an exploding briefcase. Who could forget the shout out to that figure in the 40-year-old Virgin?
Is that the $6 Million Man's boss?
It's Oscar Goldman.
Why do you have that?
That's worth a lot of money. That's much more valuable than Steve Austin.
There was Maskatron, a menacing cyborg villain who could disguise himself by changing his face. And the best of the bunch, Bionic Bigfoot, who Steve originally fought in the two-parter The Secret of Bigfoot, played in those episodes by Andre the Giant. Kenner made a number of accessories and playsets for Steve Austin. One of my favorites is the Bionic Transport and Repair Station. First, you could lay it out as a repair station where you would put Steve Austin and have his bionic features tuned up. Then it all pieces together to make the Bionic Transport, which is a great way to store your Steve Austin. I go to a lot of antique stores and a lot of vintage toy stores, and I really don't run into the Steve Austin action figure that often. So I thought, maybe this is for the most part forgotten. But boy, I was wrong about that. After a Facebook post, I received a number of comments and pictures proving that 40 plus years after this show was canceled, this figure is still very popular with collectors. And I know there was a Bionic Woman figure, but that's another story for another time. So with inflation, how much would the $6 Million Man cost today? Well, he would be the $26 million man. And there you have it, Steve Austin, the $6 Million Man. Number 4 on my list of the top 5 coolest action figures of the 60s and 70s. Number 3, Major Matt Mason. In the 1960s, every kid wanted to be an astronaut. That's why Mattel produced Major Matt Mason in the Man in Space series, a toy so ahead of its time that when it was introduced in 1966, it had beat Neil Armstrong to the moon by 3 years.
Meet Major Matt Mason, Mattel's Man in Space, and the bravest astronaut yet. He lives on the moon. We may all be there soon. And he gets around with a jet. Until Sergeant Storm in his red uniform, Major Matt worked all alone. Now, together, they face the dangers of space and seek to learn the unknown.
Matt's suit and accessories were inspired by early designs for actual space exploration. In fact, Mattel's VP of R&D was a former Raytheon engineer named Jack Ryan. This posable 6-inch figure is what's called a bendy. It's rubber formed over a wire frame, which means it's not built for the long haul. But then again, it originally sold for only a couple bucks. The Man in Space team was Major Matt Mason, Sergeant Storm, radiology scientist Doug Davis, and rocket scientist Jeff Long. As interest in the space program faded, the series would move into more science fiction by adding a few alien characters. There was Callisto, Matt's friend from Jupiter with a transparent green head. Captain Laser was another friendly alien. As you can see here, he was much larger than Matt, which has led to speculation that this figure was originally part of another toy line. And the super cool and now super hard to find Scorpio. This figure is particularly valuable, which breaks my heart because I had him as a kid and I don't have him now. Like a lot of the other toys at the time, the money wasn't made in the figures, the money was made with all the accessories. And Major Matt Mason was no different. There are a lot of cool accessories with this line. There was the space bubble here, which looked like a hamster ball. You could tow it with one of the vehicles of the series like this Unitread hauler. It was cool because when it spun, the figure inside would stay upright. There's this moon suit, which was based on concept drawings for a possible real spacesuit. There was the 3-foot-tall, multi-level space station. Matt's headquarters complete with lighted space beacon. And my favorite right here, the space crawler, which claimed it could crawl over anything and land on its feet. So now 50 years later, we're going to put those claims to the test. What we have here is the crawler and a little bit of rough stretch in my backyard. And we're just going to see if it truly can crawl over anything. And let's turn this thing on, probably the first time in decades. And let's see how it goes. Kind of ran out of steam there toward the end, but oh no, not too bad for a toy this old. Mattel stopped production here on Major Matt Mason in 1970. You can still find these on eBay, of course, but with this fragile wireframe, it's harder to find the ones that can still hold a pose. And there you have it, Major Matt Mason, number 3 on my list of the top 5 coolest action figures of the 60s and 70s. Now, number 2, Evel Knievel. If you were a boy growing up in the 1970s, most likely you were an Evel Knievel fan, the greatest daredevil of all time. His motorcycle jumps were legendary, and his toys were no different. Released in 1973, Evel Knievel, King of the Stuntman, was a 6-inch tall bendy that rapidly became Ideal's bestseller. Wearing his famous red, white, and blue uniform, this figure, like Evel himself, dared us to break it. The accessories originally capitalized on Evel's real-life motorcycle daredevil jumps. There was the stunt stadium and a scramble van. There was even a wink to a Snake River Canyon jump with the Canyon Skycycle rocket.
Evel's riding the amazing Skycycle. That gyro power sends him over 100 feet at top speed. Loop-de-loop, and he's not through yet. Into the dragster. Evel's super sprint car with built-in drag chute to slow him down. What a hope! And now, the Skycycle. That daredevil death-defying supersonic skyplane on wheels. And here he is on the super cool chopper bike with the power that can really rip. He's sensational.
The cornerstone of the Evel Knievel line was the famous stunt cycle, which featured the Energizer. I've got one right here, complete with its box and instructions. What do you say we pretend it's the 1970s and open it up like we just got it? I recently bought this Evel Knievel stunt cycle complete with the box, and as you can see, this box is not in terrible shape, but still the iconic box that every kid in the 70s would love to have underneath their Christmas tree come Christmas morning. And then, of course, with that inside, there were instructions. And here they are. Not in terrible shape, not in the best of shape, but it is 40-plus-year-old paper. And you have your assembly and play instructions, how to put together everything, and then on the other side here, how to use it. Up here at the top, we had the stunt positions here in the instructions. Kind of cool. We had the cross bike stand, head stands, saddle stands, and other trick stands, which would require buying additional Evel Knievels, which I'm sure Ideal loved that. That's kind of neat. So let's fold that back up and put that back in the box here. Next we would have the Energizer, which is what powered the stunt cycle. Here it is. It came originally in 2 pieces. I've already snapped this together, and honestly I don't want to unsnap it. So I'm afraid something this old might not survive that. So you had the Energizer there. And last but not least, we have the Evel Knievel figure on the stunt cycle. Here he is in his iconic red, white, and blue uniform. And it fit right in the slot here. And there we go. The stunt cycle is a lot heavier than I remember it, but I guess it had to be built to be durable because the whole point of this toy was to jump and crash it. Ideal milked everything they could from the Evel Knievel line through 1977, including a figure of his teenage son Robbie and a set geared toward girls called Dairy Daring. The amazing stunt cycle, plus the fact this toy was based on a real-life daredevil, puts Evel at number 2 on our countdown. Now, number 1, G.I. Joe. Originally released in Christmas of 1964, G.I. Joe was the very first action figure, or as it said on the box, America's movable fighting man, a term coined to fight the industry's reluctance to market a doll to boys. But boy were they wrong. G.I. Joe, with his 19 points of articulation, was an instant hit, with commercials featuring this unforgettable theme song.
G.I. Joe, fighting man from head to toe, on the land, on the sea, in the air.
The original G.I. Joe represented the 4 branches of the U.S. Armed Forces. There were Action Soldier, Action Pilot, Action Sailor, and Action Marine. So I bought this G.I. Joe at an antique store a few weeks ago, and it's in the original box, and I think it's 1966-ish. But I just wanted to show you, if you bought this in the store back then, what you would be getting. So here's your G.I. Joe Action Marine, and you would undo the box. In these you would get the Marine Manual, which had all sorts of stuff, also pushed other accessories. Showed you how you could use your Joe there. You also would get something like this. It would try to get you to join the G.I. Joe Club. And with that, you would get iron-on transfer for your shirt, personalized official G.I. Joe dog tag, a newsletter, membership certificate, ID card, and a catalog. You could join this for the whopping cost of 50 cents. Then in here we had G.I. Joe himself. He's in his fatigues. He's got his dog tags there. This is what he would have came with, just the fatigues. He also has a hat. I do not think this is the original hat that went with him, but I'll take it for now. So that is the G.I. Joe Action Marine circa 1965-66 in the box. That's what you would have got for your $4 something in the mid-60s. Joe was so popular that other toy companies quickly tried to make their own cheap imitations. Hasbro was faced with a very unique challenge, which leads us to today's collector's class. If you can't trademark the human figure, how did Hasbro protect their investment? First, the printed copyright on his rear. Then the iconic scar on his right cheek. And finally, which was originally a mistake, his fingernail being on the wrong side of his left thumb. Originally there were only 4 figures, but there were a lot of accessories. Taken from the same business model Mattel did with Barbie, this is where Hasbro would make its profits. The G.I. Joe figure originally sold for $4, but there were hundreds of outfits. You could gear Joe up to fight fires in this heat suit. Then turn that same figure into a mountaineer. There were vehicles, communication equipment, mess kits, and of course all sorts of weapons. If the military used it, Joe had it. Including one of my very favorites, this really cool space capsule that you could send Joe into orbit.
Is he ready to go into space with a new G.I. Joe astronaut capsule and spacesuit? Silver uniform, space helmet, communications cord. The realistic capsule has simulated retro rockets. Sliding canopy, control panel too. And the capsule floats so recoveries can be made. There's even a phonograph record of an actual flight.
In 1970, most likely because of the Vietnam War, G.I. Joe shifted from a military theme to more of an adventure theme. Thus began the era of G.I. Joe Adventure Team. And if you grew up during this time, you'll remember him for his lifelike hair and kung fu grip. In the 70s, Hasbro even produced a bionic version of this line to compete with the popular $6 million man figure. His name, Mike Power, Atomic Man. Hasbro quit making the 12-inch G.I. Joe in 1976. Since then, there have been a lot of commemorative editions and reissues just like these. Unfortunately, I have seen sellers try to pass these off as original. So there you have it, G.I. Joe, the king of the action figures, #1 on our countdown of the coolest figures of the 60s and 70s. Thanks for watching, and please hit subscribe so you can see more great Collector Guy videos. And always remember, surround yourself with what you love.